Hi, and welcome back to my video blog for films about painting spring 2020. And today I will be fact-checking some of Professor Peck's claims in his most recent lecture on the Enlightenment. Now, the first fact that I wanted to double check that Professor Peck had mentioned was about Thomas Paine's American Crisis. Now, so Professor Peck claimed that the American Crisis was read to every soldier to have them inspired, and he went on to say that it was word for word. His second book, The American Crisis, was actually read to every American soldier in the camps to try to inspire them to continue fighting. It was read in taverns to try to inspire people to go and join the revolution, to go and fight, even die for a cause. So I was kind of curious about this because I had never heard of the American Crisis, but I have heard of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. So on the History Channel's website, their article, Thomas Paine Publishes the American Crisis, it states that Washington commanded that the freshly printed pamphlet be read aloud, and this printed pamphlet was American Crisis, to be read aloud to his dispirited men. The rousing prose had its intended effect. Reciting Paine's impassioned words, the beleaguered troops mustered their remaining hopes for victory and crossed the icy Delaware River to defeat hungover Hessians on Christmas night, and on January 2nd, the British Army's best general, Earl Cornwallis, at the Battle of Princeton. With victory in New Jersey, Washington won not only 2 battles, but also the love and thanks of men and women. So it fact checks there that clearly that Washington did read American Crisis to the troops, but I don't know about taverns, so I'm going to do a little bit of more research. So while it was true that the American Crisis was read to every soldier to try and lift their spirits, I did find an inaccuracy in with what Professor Peck claimed. So, I think he might have gotten Common Sense and the American Crisis mixed up in terms of its popularity in taverns. So, when I tried to Google the American Crisis read in taverns, I really didn't get anything, but I found Common Sense read in taverns. So, from PBS.org's article for Chronicle of the Revolution on Thomas Paine, it states that Thomas Paine inspired the American Revolution with a prose that spoke directly to the people. Common Sense was devoured and debated by Americans in taverns, reading clubs, parlors, and street corners. The American Crisis, number 1, the first in a series of essays meant to boost morale and exhort to the revolution, has perhaps the most famous opening sentence in American literature. These are the times that try men's souls. So, while the American Crisis obviously is a popular one of Thomas Paine's work, it doesn't really say anything about taverns, but Common Sense does. Now, let's check out another source. This is on constitutioncenter.org. This article is called How Thomas Paine's Other Pamphlets Saved the Revolution, and let's check it out. So, in the case of Common Sense, the publicity was literally word of mouth, since people would buy the pamphlet and shout the words on street corners and inside taverns for the illiterate to hear. But let's see what else comes up for taverns on this page discussing Thomas Paine and American Crisis. All right. So, again, with American Crisis, really all I'm finding on it, and as I'm quoting from this constitutioncenter.org article, as I mentioned before, it said, while the American Crisis did much to inspire the troops, its fame was nowhere near that of Common Sense, which was essentially the first viral mass communications event in America. So again, it sounds as if Common Sense was more of the one that was seen in taverns, and American Crisis was more so seen on the battlefield. Now, one more, because we need to back it up. Now, this is on origins.osu.edu, And this is an article called Common Sense, Salute Paine, Not Jefferson on the 4th by William C. Cashadas. Now, let's see what is up with this one. All right. So, okay. So, in this article, it states that the brilliance of Paine's work was that it expressed the ideas of revolution in language that the masses could understand. Common sense was aroused public opinion in America in an unprecedented way. It quickly became a bestseller, with 120,000 copies sold in the first year after publication. It found its ways into bookstores, private libraries, and taverns in both Europe and America. Common Sense also instigated hundreds of responses, pro and con, in the form of pamphlets, broadsides, and newspaper editorials. So, meanwhile, a little bit later down, Paine's actions mirrored his beliefs. In July 1776, he joined the Continental Army and worked to maintain its morale by writing a series of 13 essays later published as The American Crisis. And there is nothing stated about American Crisis being read in taverns. However, in this article, it is about common sense. So, it seems like there might have been a little mix-up, at least on the facts of which pamphlet of Thomas Paine's, or like the difference between them. One was more for the masses, which was Common Sense, and The American Crisis was more so for the soldiers. So there was just a little inaccuracy, nothing crazy. But the only reason I wanted to look it up is because I'd never heard of this before. Similarly with the first fact I wanted to check. Again, I'd never heard of The American Crisis, but I've heard of Common Sense. And when I heard that American Crisis was read to the soldiers, I wanted to fact check that, which was true. But the fact that if it was read in taverns and all over the place, it seems like that was actually Common Sense and not The American Crisis that was read in that mass way. So there is a yes and there is a no to that answer, and this leads me to my third fact I would like. So the final fact that I wanted to double check from Professor Peck's lecture was about Benjamin Franklin. So Professor Peck did mention that Benjamin Franklin was the one who was picked to go to France and try to make a deal with the King of France to help them out with the revolution against the British, since he knew, obviously, the French and the British, not really close friends right now. And it had something to do with, like, the weather and hurricanes and the fact that the French had some Navy fleets in the Caribbean. But I was more interested in the fact that it was Benjamin Franklin. This is something I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of Benjamin Franklin leaving America? I don't know, maybe I'm just not cultured, but I've never heard of that. So I wanted to double check if it was actually him that won and not somebody else. I'm very used to him just being the lightning rod guy, but I've never thought of him as being like the diplomat. So from AmericanHeritage.com, they have an article called Benjamin Franklin and the French Alliance. And here it says, late in October 1776, Benjamin Franklin sailed for France to direct the foreign sector of the extraordinary war into which his young country had been plunged. It was an entirely new sort of war because the United States was a new sort of country whose survival depended less on land fighting than on a complex of factors in which Franklin was deeply involved. So it's true. It was Benjamin Franklin, and for some reason that surprises me. I don't know why. But I guess, I just always picture him only being in America, and I never heard of any of them, like the big, the main guys from the American Revolution leaving America during the war to try and get help. So that was kind of interesting. So that is it for today, and thank you for watching.